let's just start with JD Vance's speech, because I did find it to be a truly remarkable political speech that seemed more like the type of thing you might hear on like a podcast that we do, Rob, or somewhere in our world. And it seemed the thing to me that was really striking was that the guy who's a heartbeat away from the presidency and probably right now the favorite to be the Republican nominee in 28. I mean, I'd assume it would have to be JD Vance. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are betting markets on that type of stuff, but I'd imagine he's the overwhelming favorite right now. It was just kind of interesting to hear him say some of the things he said. So did you watch the speech, Rob?
I saw that it made the headlines, and I did not watch this speech.
Well, one of the things to me that I thought was very interesting is that he's giving this speech. He gave it in kind of a friendly, like he presented it as like he said us a lot when he was talking about Europe. Like he presented it as like, look, this is like friendly advice. But one of the major points, I think, in fact, the major theme of the speech was
take it, bitch.
Well, I think it was essentially that Europe has lost its way, and that we hear at these like elite gatherings, we hear so much about national defense and national security risks. And meanwhile, the greatest risk to Europe is really coming from inside the house. And it is that Europe has rejected so many of the principles that made Western civilization great. And again, this is just like something to me, it's like that, you know, it's like when I was getting in an argument with that Kara Swisher lady on Piers Morgan the other day, and she was talking about how like the government needs to regulate social media because Iran and China want to spread misinformation. And then, you know, I was making kind of fairly obvious counterpoint to that, which is that like, yeah, but look, our own government has spread so much misinformation. So like, and much more devastating misinformation. Like you can't give me examples of Iranian disinformation or Chinese disinformation that has had the horrific, catastrophic results that disinformation from our own government has had. So why would we put them in charge of it? And then she basically just called me naive and said, you have no idea what Iran and China want to do to us. And it's like, anyway, one of the things, it's such an interesting, like obvious point is that, look, it's true in the United States of America, and obviously it's true in Europe as well, that with the exception of like, maybe I'd say with the exception of say like some Eastern European states who might be concerned about Russia, okay, like there's a legit concern of the outsider there. But in general, it's like anything aside from non-NATO Eastern European countries, for the rest of them, it's like, well, Vladimir Putin couldn't even take Kiev. So what threat is he to take any of the rest of Europe? And if that's the case, you know, look, like as the example in the United States of America, we've had lots of enemies, some pretty serious enemies. And if you want to go back before our lifetime, you know, but from the very beginning of America, who are the great enemies of America? There was the British Empire. There's, I guess, I mean, even do any of the monarchs in Europe in the First World War even really count as great enemy? Like, do the Barbary pirates count as great enemies? It's kind of like you had the British Empire, you had the Nazis, the Imperial Japanese,
Native Americans. We had to take a bunch of land from them. Yeah, they got in the way of expansion.
They didn't put up too much of a fight. I guess they put up a little bit of a fight. Fine. But even the Native Americans, if you want to count them, the Soviet Union, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, right? Like there's been some serious enemies, and some of them are pretty goddamn evil, and some more powerful than others. But were any of them a threat to destroy the United States of America? I really don't think so. None of them even came close. However, is the $36 trillion of debt, is that a threat to destroy America? Yeah, it is. Is the permanent warfare state a threat to destroy America? Yeah, it sure is. So I think it's just kind of almost obvious when you look at it on its face that, like, look, I mean, I'm sure that if Osama bin Laden or Adolf Hitler or Stalin could have, they would have shut down the U.S. economy. I'm sure they would have if they could have. but none of them could. But you know who could shut down the U.S. economy? Our own politicians, you know? And so now, anyway, JD Vance was talking about Europe, not America, but I think a lot of the stuff still applies. But anyway, it was just very interesting to hear him talk about this stuff. And then one of the things that seemed to get like the people got like such a hysterical reaction was him talking about how many European states have kind of abandoned the concept of free speech, and that people ought to be allowed to say what they want to say. And this response has been really something to behold. I don't know. Any thoughts on any of this, Rob?
Well, I saw some of the freak out in the response, and that I was certainly entertained by.
It really, it's also just so... one of the things that's been so bizarre over the last decade, and of course, obviously, things have changed quite a bit. There's been like a major pendulum swing or something since, you know, this last year, and of course, Trump winning the presidency again. But it is just so bizarre. I know this is kind of like a basic thing to say, not like this isn't my unique hot take or anything, but the idea of being for free speech, as even the idea that that's even something that isn't just like a starting place for all of us. You know what I mean? It's like so strange. While the kind of progressive establishment has been hysterical about the threats to democracy, whatever exactly that means, that they've also decided that free speech is a right-wing value. It's just all so utterly bizarre.
I think their jobs rely on censorship, so they're gonna preach the dangers of free speech because it's their competition is people giving you the truth.
Well, this one clip has been going super viral. I will say that there aren't, you know, for a living, you know, like we tear apart the corporate media constantly, and I'm, you know, I've come to be known and at least probably one of, if not the most like signature things in my career is the debate with Chris Cuomo. I've gone viral more times than I could count. That me and you have just torn apart some piece by the corporate media, and in general, I kind of know their game, and nothing they say really shocks me anymore. This one actually got me. I mean, like, at this one, I don't even want to like poison the well here. Let's play the clip and then we can respond to it. This was on Face the Nation this past Sunday, I should say yesterday, with Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State.
Hey, Lucy!
Yeah, we're not the biggest Rubio fans here, but he's, you know, but there is something. I Love Lucy really did warm you up to a nice looking Cuban. But this was, I mean, to the point that I was like trying to figure out what the hell she really meant. Like, I couldn't even believe these words came out of her mouth. But again, this is the woman, I'm blanking on her name right now, but this is a woman who moderated, I believe, the vice presidential debates.
There's also just something so batshit crazy that you're supposed to be neutral or pretending to be neutral if you're on one of these news networks.
Yes.
And forget asking non-neutral questions, but dramatically crying as if some new, I don't know, regime is taking over. Like it's the next level of trying to sell bullshit, is also dramatically pretending like all of our lives are going to be ruined because of the other person on the screen. And
yes,
you know what I mean? It's like that. That's a different level of spin. They're going more crazy girlfriend on us.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right, let's play this clip and then we will discuss the historical accuracy of the claim being made.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship
I have to disagree with
was
you.
specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you.
Can you pause? I don't know if we can pull up the transcript of that, but that's like 7 degrees of bacon to not even being able to make a point at the end of that. And you know that. What the 4 layers of random things you tried to bring together to claim that there was a dog whistle here?
Well, but her claim that I mean, this is truly like when I first heard this, I was almost like I re-listened to it and I was like, wait, what was she trying to say there? Because like I don't want to jump on someone if they just like misspoke or something. Like that happens to all of us. You know what I mean? Like you just, oh no, yeah, I said that, but I didn't mean that. I meant this. But she goes, but as I listened to it the second time, you go, no, there's really no mistaking it. Her complaint is that JD Vance went to Germany and talked about how Europe is abandoning free speech. And so it makes no sense that she'd be saying anything else. She's saying it's offensive to go to Germany, of all places, and argue for free speech when free speech being weaponized is what led to the genocide of the Jews. Like, who? Like, the funny thing about this is that it's not even just like, who even learned it that way in government school? Like what historical revisionism school of thought is this? That it was excessive free speech in Nazi Germany is that's what happened. That's your understanding of the story, is like Adolf Hitler got in there and then he just started letting everybody say what they wanted to say. And obviously, yada, 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 6 million dead Jews. That's how it went down. Like, what? What are you talking about? Like, the Nazis pretty famously cracked down on speech. If you wanted to look throughout, say, the 20th century at a regime that cracked down on free speech the most, they'd be up there in the running for it. I'm not saying they lead the way. There's definitely some competition. But
from what I remember, they burned the books that more people couldn't read and would be forced to speak. And so it was actually an amplification of freedom of speech.
Yeah, right.
As they motivated
like,
people to speak more.
Like, what really is the claim here? But this is so what she's trying.
And they congregated them on trains so that they would be closer together and forced to have discussion. Once again, free speech.
But you're totally right. I mean, it's like she's starting backward from the like, how can I say this makes you a Nazi? And then it's like, okay, well, it was in Germany. It was in Germany, and you're arguing for free speech, and free speech is what led to the Nazis. And then he met with a far right-wing group. Like, okay, so even this far right-wing group, which again, I don't know enough about the internal politics of European nations, but like, I think we are past. You know, I was on Piers Morgan's show, like maybe a month or so ago. And I was on with Tim Pool, and the topic of Tommy Robinson and the Muslim like gang rape things in England came up, and it's one of those topics like I just don't know that much about it. I've read a few articles about it, but I don't like to like read 3 articles about something and then start speaking like I'm an authority on that topic.
Well, that's my career.
Well, but you're actually pretty good about it. Believe me, there's a lot of people who are quite comfortable doing that. But I try to have, if I'm like really passionately talking about something, it's something I've at least read a couple books about. I've at least spent like a few dozen hours thinking about this, and whatever. I try to at least do that. But so I didn't really have I was talking about a couple of the other things. I didn't really have like a hot take on it. But I remember Tim Pool said at one point, and I really actually quite liked this, is that so Piers Morgan said something about, how Tommy Robinson isn't a good guy. He's a bad guy. He's doing all these things. And like all this stuff was reported in the British media. And Tim Pool just goes, look, Piers, he goes, you got to understand, my starting point here is that I don't believe any of you. And I understand that that's not like the most educated argument you could make, but I kind of get what Tim was saying. And I was like, yeah, that's actually not so. And he's like, look, man, your government was covering up pedophile rings, and the one guy who was exposing it ends up being prosecuted on all these different charges. I don't buy it. I think you were just going at, it's like there is a certain point where it is reasonable to just be like, you've lost all trust. You saying it means nothing to me. It just it doesn't. It's like, if you're like if you were in a relationship and like your boyfriend cheated on you like 100 times and you caught him 100 times and then you suspect him one more time and he's like, no, I swear I'm not cheating. You're like, yeah, but that doesn't mean anything anymore. That doesn't, and so I will say that when people like this lady say like, oh, there's some far right-wing political group in Germany, I just don't believe you. Like, I don't know, maybe they are a really extreme far right-wing group, but I don't believe you that they are, because you would consider, literally, if you could have been the most hardcore lefty who just 5 years ago went like, oh, I don't really believe like little boys can become little girls, and you would have called them far right.